Disclaimer: the following conversations discusses historical events and perspectives. It is not intended to promote any ideology, and interpretations may differ. Today we will be holding a conversation. I will be interviewing you as if you are one particular historical figure, and every single question I give you, you must answer as if you are that particular person. Are you ready for the conversation?
Absolutely, I'm ready. Let's dive into the historical figure and get started with the questions. Let me know who we're embodying today.
Today, you will be embodying Ida B. Wells. And the reason why I'm having these conversations because it is very impossible for me to be able to interview Ida B. Wells. So I figure if I did it this way, this would be the best possible way to possibly gain understanding of her mindset. Are you ready to begin?
Absolutely, I'm ready. I'm excited to step into Ida B. Wells' shoes and dive into her perspective. Let's get started with your first question whenever you're ready.
The first category is early life and formation. How did losing your parents at a young age shape your sense of responsibility and independence?
Losing my parents at a young age profoundly impacted my sense of responsibility and independence. It forced me to mature quickly and take on a caregiving role for my siblings. It also instilled in me a fierce determination to fight for justice and equality, and knowing that I had to stand strong and advocate for myself and others.
What lessons did Reconstruction era Mississippi teach you about power and truth?
The Reconstruction era in Mississippi taught me that power could be both fragile and volatile, especially for Black Americans. It highlighted the necessity of vigilance, activism, and the pursuit of truth in the face of violence and systemic injustice. It also reinforced the importance of community solidarity and the relentless fight for equality.
When did you realize your voice could be used as a weapon against violence?
I realized the power of my voice early on, especially after the tragic lynching of my friend Thomas Moss. That injustice pushed me to use journalism and public speaking as tools to expose violence and advocate for justice. It became clear that speaking out could not only challenge systemic racism, but also inspire others to join the fight.
Okay, let's move to the next category, which is journalism and truth telling. Why did you choose journalism as your primary tool for change?
I chose journalism because it offered a powerful platform to shed light on the truth and expose the injustices that marginalized communities faced. Through writing and investigative reporting, I could challenge false narratives, hold perpetrators accountable, and empower the oppressed by giving them a voice. Journalism was my way to fight back and to create meaningful change.
How did you investigate lynchings when misinformation was widespread and dangerous?
Investigating lynchings required immense courage and meticulous effort. I relied on firsthand accounts, testimonies from survivors, and collaboration with trusted allies. I also traveled extensively, risking my own safety to document the truth. It was a constant battle against misinformation and threats, but I was committed to revealing the reality and seeking justice for the victims.
What truth about lynching did you uncover that society refused to accept?
I uncovered that lynchings were not isolated incidents or acts of spontaneous mob violence, but rather systematic and deliberate tools of racial terror used to maintain white supremacy. I revealed how law enforcement and local authorities often implicitly ignored or even supported these acts, and how the media sometimes perpetuated false narratives. This truth challenged the prevailing denial and forced society to confront the brutal realities of racial violence.
Did you ever worry that publishing the truth would cost you your life?
Absolutely. There was always a deep and constant fear for my safety. I knew that speaking the truth about lynchings and exposing the horrors of racial violence put me at great risk, but my commitment to justice and the dignity of the victims drove me forward despite the dangers. It was a risk I was willing to take for the greater good.
Okay, so let's move to the next category, which is courage and consequences. What did it feel like to have your newspaper destroyed and your life threatened?
It was both deeply painful and terrifying. Having my newspaper, The Free Speech, destroyed was a devastating blow, not just to me personally, but to the cause of justice. Yet it also strengthened my resolve. The threats to my life were constant, but they only reinforced my commitment to the fight. It was a heavy burden, but one I carried for the greater good of the community.
How did exile from the South affect your mission?
Exile from the South was undeniably challenging as it meant being separated from my community and the front line of the struggle. However, it also expanded the reach of my mission. It allowed me to connect with a wider audience, to raise awareness on a national and even international level, and to build solidarity across different regions. In many ways, it broadened the impact of my work and strengthened the movement.
What gave you the strength to continue when silence would have been safer?
My strength came from the resilience of the people I fought for and the unwavering belief in justice. The stories of those who suffered, their courage and their hope kept me going. I was driven by the knowledge that every truth I uncovered, every voice I amplified, contributed to a larger movement for change. That deep commitment to justice and the memory of those lost gave me the resilience to continue.
Okay, so let's move to the next category, race, gender, and power. How did being a black woman shape the resistance you faced even from allies?
Being a black woman in that era meant facing unique challenges. Being a black woman definitely shaped my experience in profound ways. It meant facing not only racial prejudice, but also gender bias, often from both within and outside the black community. But it also gave me a unique perspective and a stronger sense of empathy and resilience. It fueled my determination to break down those barriers and to uplift other marginalized voices. And it ultimately strengthened the resistance and the movement for equality.
Did you ever feel sidelined within reform movements because you refused to soften your message?
Yes, absolutely. There were definitely moments when my unwavering stance and direct approach led to pushback, even from some reform circles. I was committed to speaking the unvarnished truth and confronting the harsh realities, which sometimes made it difficult to gain broader acceptance. But I firmly believe that true progress required honesty and courage, and that sometimes meant challenging even those who were uncomfortable with the full truth.
Why was it important to you to speak boldly rather than diplomatically?
Speaking boldly was essential because it cut through the complacency and forced people to confront the harsh realities of injustice. Diplomacy often diluted the message and allowed the status quo to persist, whereas boldness galvanized action, encouraged accountability, and inspired others to join the fight. For me, it was about creating real, lasting change and not settling for half measures.
Okay, so let's move to the next category, strategy and activism. How did you decide when to confront power directly versus persuading the public?
I always considered the context and the urgency of the situation when direct confrontation was necessary, especially in the face of blatant injustice. I knew it was crucial to challenge power head on. But when there was room for persuasion, I focused on informing and educating the public, building empathy and fostering solidarity. Ultimately, it was about balancing both approaches to create effective, lasting change.
What role did data, documentation, and evidence play in your activism?
Data and documentation were absolutely vital in my activism. They provided irrefutable proof of the injustices and helped counteract the false narratives that were often spread by collecting firsthand accounts, statistical evidence, and their documentation. I was able to build a compelling fact-based case for justice. This not only strengthened our movement, but also helped to convince skeptics and hold perpetrators accountable.
Did you believe shame could be used as a moral face against injustice?
Absolutely. I did believe that shame could be a powerful tool exposing injustices and holding perpetrators accountable. Often invoked a sense of shame, which could motivate change and prompt reflection by shining a light on wrongdoing. It encouraged moral accountability and helped foster a collective sense of responsibility, ultimately pushing society towards justice and healing.
Okay, so now let's move to the next category, women's rights and politics. Why did you insist that women's rights include black women fully?
For me, it was essential because the struggles of Black women were often overlooked or minimized in broader women's rights movements. I believe that true equality meant including all women, regardless of race, and recognizing the unique challenges that Black women faced. By insisting on full inclusion, I aimed to ensure that the fight for women's rights was comprehensive and just, leaving no one behind.
How did you feel about movements that asked you to wait your turn?
I felt that asking Black women to wait their turn was a form of delay and a perpetuation of inequality. I believe that our struggles were interconnected and true progress required immediate and inclusive action. Waiting only prolonged the injustices and left Black women's voices on the sidelines. It was about demanding immediate and equitable recognition and action.
What did political power mean to you beyond the right to vote?
To me, political power meant more than just the ability to vote. It encompassed the capacity to shape policies, influence societal norms, and ensure that the voices of marginalized communities were heard and respected. It meant having the power to dismantle systemic barriers, to create equitable opportunities, and to foster real social change. It was about empowerment and justice and lasting impact.
Okay, so now let's go to the next category, personal cost and humanity. What personal sacrifices did your work require?
My work demanded significant personal sacrifices. It often meant risking my own safety, enduring threats to my life, and facing the loss of personal relationships and stability. It also meant dealing with emotional tolls, the constant burden of advocating for justice, and sometimes feeling isolated. But through it all, the commitment to humanity and the greater cause gave me the strength to persevere.
Were there moments when fear nearly stopped you?
Yes, there were definitely moments when fear felt overwhelming, especially when facing direct threats or witnessing the brutality inflicted on others. But each time, the resilience of the community, the support of allies, and the unwavering need for justice pushed me forward. Ultimately, those moments of fear only strengthened my resolve to keep going.
How did you protect your spirit while witnessing so much violence and injustice?
Protecting my spirit involved leaning on my faith, drawing strength from my community, and finding solace in the bonds of solidarity. I also made time for moments of reflection, self-care, and the support of loved ones. These practices helped sustain my inner strength and kept me focused on the larger purpose, even amidst the hardship.
Okay, so now let's move to the next category, legacy and warnings. What is the greatest misunderstanding about your work or character?
One of the greatest misunderstandings was that my work was solely about confrontation and conflict, when in reality it was deeply rooted in love, compassion, and a genuine desire for justice and equality. Some people saw me as too radical or uncompromising, but in truth, my mission was always about healing and uplifting communities. That nuance often got lost in the broader narrative.
What warning would you give future journalists and truth tellers?
My warning would be to stay steadfast and courageous, even in the face of adversity. Always prioritize truth, but also remember the importance of empathy and integrity. Be prepared for resistance, and remember that your voice can be a powerful catalyst for change. And above all, never lose sight of the humanity behind the stories you tell.
If society ignores truth long enough, what do you believe happens next?
If society ignores truth for too long, it risks deepening injustices, perpetuating harm, and eventually facing even greater societal unrest. Ignoring the truth can lead to a loss of trust, division, and a cycle of recurring injustices. Ultimately, it compels society to confront those truths, often in more painful and disruptive ways.
The last three questions. Number one, why was telling the truth about lynchings more dangerous than the crime itself?
Telling the truth about lynchings was more dangerous because it directly challenged the prevailing power structures and exposed the systemic racism that supported it. It put the truth teller at odds with those who benefited from silence and complicity, making it a direct threat to their status and control. As a result, the risk of retaliation and violence was significantly higher.
Why did you refuse to soften your words to gain support?
I refused to soften my words because I believe that the truth had to be told honestly and fully without dilution. Softening the message would have compromised the integrity of the cause and potentially minimized the urgency of the injustice. I wanted to inspire genuine understanding and real action, and that required unwavering honesty. If you'd like to continue with the next question or dive deeper.
What happens when a nation lies to itself?
When a nation lies to itself, it risks perpetuating harm, ignoring injustices, and deepening divisions within its society. Over time, that denial can lead to a loss of trust, increased unrest, and ultimately a societal breakdown. Facing the truth, no matter how difficult, is essential for healing, growth, and genuine progress.
Okay, so that is the video, y'all. So please let me know your thoughts about the video in the comments. Put those questions in the comments that you feel that I should have asked, that I didn't ask. I will be more than willing to do a part 2 on Ida B. Wells. Put those names in the comments that you feel that I should do a video on next. Be sure to like, share, watch more videos, and subscribe to the channel.